Welcome back to the final episode of the Rankable podcast for 2023. And I have a fantastic guest to end on. All year, we've been talking about SEO. We've been talking about AI. We've been talking about LLMs. And there is a real environmental impact to all this technology. I actually know firsthand, this guest doesn't know this, but I live in Virginia right by all the data centers in the world of Google. And so I know like that there are these massive buildings all around us. I'm joined today by Chris Butterworth. Chris is the founder and lead consultant of Align. Now, Align is a digital sustainability agency. Like basically they help you, consultancy, they help you transform your business to be more eco-conscious, more friendly. They do a lot of these important aspects of putting the plan in place because it's easy to say that you're going to get to net zero carbon emissions and you don't have a plan in place. It's probably not going to happen. Now, Chris, he's an experienced design technologist turned digital sustainability consultant after discovering carbon emissions of the internet is, well, we're going to get to it. I'll let him talk about it. Chris, thank you so much for joining me today. How you doing, man?
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, I'm doing pretty good.
I'm excited to discuss this topic because as we were discussing right before the podcast, there's a lot of overlap between our daily internet usage and all that we do in the world of SEO and generative AI and the impact it has on our environment. So I just want to ask you point blank for our audience, can you define digital sustainability? Like, why is it crucial in the world that we live in?
So the most widely adopted definition of digital sustainability is calling it the process of applying social, economic, and environmental stewardship principles to digital products and services and data delivered via the internet. So that is kind of ESG for digital products. You know, if you have a huge amount of data, why are you keeping it? Is it secure? Is it private? Are your users protected? Is it ethical? And also, is it environmental? You know, is your supply chain using renewable energy or not? Are there different decisions that you can make? What I tend to do is I tend to focus on the environmental side of things because it's numbers and numbers don't lie. So then, you know, what I do as part of Align is generate reports and do a lot of auditing and do a lot of training. You know, training is one of the most important things. We've got webinars, courses, everything like that ready to go to help organizations understand and lower the emissions created by this completely invisible contributor. You know, we don't think of the internet as polluting, but in reality, it's more polluting than the aviation industry. You know, we're talking around 3.7%. It's not a small amount. You know, the aviation industry is roughly 2%.
Right. Well, I mean, that's the thing. You think about like the black smoke that comes out of any sort of plane. And to your point, it's like it's all about education. I imagine like that education is so critical to your role, right?
Yeah, absolutely the most important point to it. Whether it's doing a webinar in front of a few dozen people just to try and get something out there for people to understand and take some learning with them. Like even if it's you know not replying to replying, not sending a thank you email. Sorry.
Yeah.
You know, because I think being British as well, like we're inherently polite. So as soon as somebody sends us something, well, it's like automatically reply, thank you. But you know, and even though it's a few years old, there was a study back in 2019 by an energy provider. And they literally did a study on this and said that if every UK adult stopped sending a thank you email, it would save 16,000 tons of carbon. It's unreal numbers. You know, if we talk about all of these numbers thinking, it's small, it's minimal. If the internet was a country, it would be the sixth highest polluter in the world.
That's nuts. And I mean, I'm not familiar with the UK laws, and frankly, I'm not as familiar with the US laws when it comes to regulation. We hear a lot about the auto industry in terms of regulating emissions or whatever.
Yep.
Are there regulations in place in the EU and the UK in nothing in terms of internet?
No. So there are kind of reporting standards. So like within the EU, there's the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive.
Mhm.
That's the biggest one for the EU. That's not in place in the UK. I'm pretty sure once we get our own political stuff sorted out, that it will come eventually. I'm hoping that it does because I do think that there needs to be something there. But there aren't any standards when it comes to best practices or standards when it comes to enforcing stuff. It's not like web content accessibility guidelines, which is something that kind of there are laws in place that surround those. Whether it's Section 508 in the US, I think that's the one, which is also talking about all the accessibility stuff. Like if your product can't be used by somebody with certain needs, then it needs to be addressed. And I'm hoping that eventually something similar will come out in the UK.
And it's tough because it's like it's a collective mindset. It's a social, like a lot of these people can't see the day-to-day impact. So, as a business, like in the US, if with there not being these types of regulations, it really is on the organizations and the businesses and individuals to make the change. How are you advocating for that? Like what I guess emotional heartstrings, like how are you making the pitch to businesses to actually adapt the plans that you recommend?
There's two sides to it. One of the key things if we look at like digital touch points, if we look at things like uh, websites as a prime example, there are just sustainable web design, which is a massive. It's a book. There's guidelines. There's different strategies that can be put in place. One of the key things that I always thought to say is if you make your website more sustainable, it will rank higher. It will perform better because by having a more sustainable website, it loads quicker, it behaves better, it's instantly more accessible. And I'm not talking about accessible when it comes to like web content accessibility guidelines, but also in terms of the idea of data poverty. I'm not sure what it's like in the US, but over here there's a massive difference between in connection speeds depending on where you are. If you're in the middle of a city, you might get 300-400 megabits per second, sometimes slightly slower. But like I'm in a little village, I'm in the middle of nowhere, really. So I get roughly 30. So then if I'm looking at a website that's quite heavy, that's really asset heavy and generates a lot of emissions, it's going to take a lot longer for that page to load for me. And if we go down the road like half a mile, that speed halves. If you go down even further, it halves again. Like there's that massive disparity. Like their needs in terms of accessing the internet for the most part, like even if it's going to the local authority website to find out when your bins are collected or anything like that, like stuff
Yeah.
like that will take a lot longer for them. In fact, there was actually like a really good example of this during Hurricane Katrina, which was obviously a few years ago and massive, massive tragedy. But what CNN did is they removed everything from their website that wasn't text, so that even though cell towers were down, even though connections were disrupted, it was the most lightweight experience it could be, which helped everybody get access to up-to-date information, which at that point in time was incredibly needed. Um, yeah, that's one of the key points that I always talk about. The other point is that he's saving money as well.
Mm.
So if you, it's proud of me, but like cloud storage, when we talk about like storing stuff on the cloud, I hate the term the cloud because it makes it completely ethereal. It's like I can't touch it; it's not real. Um, but yeah, I mean, you know yourself, like data centers use an incredible amount of energy. So like they are more. I compare them to factories, like Victorian factories that
Yeah.
you can see just spewing out loads and loads of smoke because that's what I see. Because that's how much they use a huge amount of electricity. Now, by reducing your demand on those services. So if you delete all files, if you archive them and take them offline, like using external hard drives or even tape media or DVDs or whatever, you're then reducing your carbon emissions massively, instantly.
It's
Deleting old
so
emails, deleting all
interesting.
files.
I mean,
It's,
you call it out like those two big aspects is like the technical debt of the website and the data, irresponsible data management, in essence,
Mhm.
for businesses are like the major issues. I guess my question is, what responsibility should be, in your opinion, on the massive behemoths like the Googles and the Amazons of the world? Because obviously, Amazon, beyond just being e-commerce, is Amazon Web Servers as well.
AWS. Yeah. So I know that both of those companies do talk about sustainability a lot. I know that if you look at like the Green Web Foundation, which is a big resource and has a list of hosting companies internationally that use renewable energy or offset. I know that Google and Amazon do that within certain data centers. Um, I also know that that especially Amazon have been under a lot of scrutiny because they have their own reporting tools, but they're not that accurate. There's another thought leader in this space who literally called them out and saying, literally, you're out by a factor of 100. And it's just unreal because there are emissions that just are not being considered. Um, and because of that, they're literally just being called out. Google are a good example of somebody who offsets everything. So what they'll do is they'll just plug into the grid, use all the electricity that they need to, and then at the end of the year, get their energy bill and go, okay, we'll pay that off, and then we'll invest the same amount in renewable energy.
That's cool. I mean, that makes
Which,
sense.
yeah, I mean, it kind of does. I mean, it's good in the way that it's actually offsetting everything, but it's not a reduction; it's an offset.
Gotcha. It's not good
You
enough,
know,
basically.
it's good. It's better than nothing, is what I would say. It's definitely not the best. I mean, if you look at like net zero targets and everything like that, net zero is all about reduction. It's not about offset, it's about reduction first. Like
Mm.
I've always said since the very beginning of my sustainability journey that I'm not anti-offset, I'm anti-offset first. And that's the approach that I like to take. I'm not one to kind of go, right, measure everything and then just offset everything. It's measure everything, strategize, lowering it, and offset it. Um, because that's what's needed. I mean, and even then, reducing it saves you a heap of money if you're looking at reducing. If you look, what if with reducing and offsetting, like offset credits are getting more and more expensive. Um, so to offset anything will cost you a lot more in the future. So reducing your emissions to in the very beginning will save you a heap of money. So
It's so
it's
interesting, like the difference between starting a business versus like transforming a business. From your
yeah.
experience, who are the people in the organization that actually typically launch these types of projects? Like, are they environmentalists? Are they the revenue, the finance folks? Like, who's actually getting these projects going, and what are their motivations?
So the most of the people that I've dealt with have kind of been almost self-appointed sustainability champions. So they're the
Yeah.
people that, if they're in an organization that doesn't have a specific sustainability role, they'll kind of go, right, I am now taking this on. I'm not changing my job title. I am still product designer, marketing manager, whatever, but I give a damn and I'm going to do something about it. So they tend to be the ones that do kick it off. I think in terms of responsibility, it's everybody, because there's something that everybody can do. Um, One of the things that we talk about within our training is the fact that everybody can do something, regardless of what your skill is. You can still do something. If you're a content manager or a marketer working on a website, there are things that you can do to lower it. If you're within leadership, it's then making digital a part of your net zero targets. It's then kind of making it align, hence the name,
Yeah.
with other sustainability goals.
Mhm.
You know, I think a lot of organizations now have those net zero targets, or have have know that they need to do something, and then it's just making sure that, yeah, that digital is a part of that, because it is often, and too often, completely ignored.
Do you, when you implement something like this, do you have like, do you recommend businesses have stringent guidelines that they abide by, similar to accessibility, or is it like a layer of review at some point in the process?
So, what I it depends on what it is that they do. If it's a
For sure.
website, or what the touch point is, because if there's a website, there's already some guidelines that are out there. I know that the W3C have actually come out with their own sustainability stuff, their own sustainability guidelines, which actually includes a lot of product management guidelines as well.
Mm.
So then that's kind of twofold. There's the sustainable web design, which again does some of the same, not in the same way. Um, so you've already got those standards straight away that you could use and work with. There's the Green Software Foundation, which does that a little bit more in depth for software products. But then there's not a lot when it comes to some of the softer skills, like email management or data management, or even like, yeah, anything to do with data they don't really touch on. Um, excuse me, outside of software and websites. Um, and that's where I come in and go, right, let's create these policies and procedures. Within the EU, in UK, we have the GDPR, General
Mhm.
Data Protection Regulation. I know that there are similar ones in the US as well, the CCPA.
Right, like
Uh,
California, but like across the
yeah,
country, it's not nearly as like,
I know this is what I found out. Like, it differs from state to state, which is
yeah.
just unreal. Like, there's no blanket legislation.
Not
Um,
yet. I mean, it gets so complicated, and it's embarrassing at some point if you do have like kind of a environmentalist like responsibility perspective. You're just like you can't, because that like makes me think you have in the UK like the entire government having your back to some extent, at least better than a lot of countries. Like how do you even, like, education is one part with in an organization. Do you have any like
mhm.
incentivizations or any sort of like programs that you found to be effective? Like you mentioned email, like how do you get people to actually be conscious about how many emails they send?
This is the difficulty. Because a
Yeah.
lot of it is changing habits. But
Right.
it's not. You can't put a guideline in place, or a policy in place that says do not send emails, or send only 5 emails per day, because there are obviously going to be circumstances where that won't be able to apply, or it won't be feasible to do. So trying to get people to be more conscious of it is, again, understanding it. We've written policies and procedures to kind of help with that,
Yeah.
such as limiting the use of reply all, limiting the use of replies, or actually clearing the email chain before pressing reply. Because it's like our email chain, every time you click reply, it includes every single email that's been
Now
previously
I feel
sent.
guilty. You and I went back and forth like a whole bunch
Oh,
of
I
times.
know.
I'm like, okay,
I
now I'm
know.
aware of it.
Luckily, it was like, I think it was like 5 times,
Yeah, it wasn't
maybe.
too bad.
It wasn't too many, but you've got to think, like, within an organization, excuse me, such as Allianz, who are a big financial services, uh, big financial services company based in Europe and the UK. They're probably going to have email chains that are going to be hundreds and hundreds of messages long, and they'll just instantly, out of habit, reply, send to everybody, reply, send to everybody. And it's that sort of thing, like online messaging, like using something like Slack or WhatsApp or Telegram or something like that, actually saves on emissions a little bit more as well,
Mm.
especially if you're including external parties. Because a lot of the time, data is sent through email travels that little bit further if they're on a separate domain. Um, so you're doing things like that can help save emissions, and having simple principles as well, like making sure that your email is not too long and not too short. Not too long so that people reading it don't know what to do with it, or they have too many things to do from it, and not short enough where it instantly needs a reply.
It makes so much sense, and there's definitely a huge takeaway there, just in terms of being conscious. Like, you just sharing this information and thinking the impact is not something that I ever thought about, and I hope the audience considers it. I do want to quickly touch on now, like thinking about it, and my mind is reeling. LLMs and generative AI, like, you must think that that's the most awful human invention ever.
I really do. I really do. I mean, it's twofold. I don't even want to get started on OpenAI and ChatGPT because I think I think there's a special place in hell for the people that invented it. Purely because not just because of the environmental aspect, but also the ethical aspect. Like the fact that it's literally been a breeding ground for hatred. The fact that they've literally OpenAI have contracted workers from Kenya and paid them an absolute pittance to go through the all of the data, remove anything that's misogynistic or hate-filled or violent. And also then, just the environmental impact of it. I know somebody who did a study on it, like just kind of picked got some estimated figures on usage and did some numbers and plugged it away and worked out that ChatGPT emits 24 tons of CO2 per day.
Mm-hmm.
And this study was done last year. So, imagine the growth that it's had over the past 12 months, and that number could easily tripled. And that's every single day.
The only thing I can think of, like the hopeful positive outcome, because it's a cat out of the bag situation, and it's hard to have any faith that things will change quickly or fast enough, is that the technology allows us to find better solutions, like ultimately results in better solutions environmentally at some point. But that's a hope and a wish, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'd hope that there are people out there that use it very efficiently and use it. If it could do, it might be able to do stuff a lot better than I can myself, which is then probably saving on emissions because it doesn't have to eat or use the internet or breathe. But then I'm certain that the vast use is, it gets a response. That's not the right response. I'll need to do it again. Or no, that's not the right response. Or it's people just experimenting, or if we're trying to do something that artificial intelligence can't quite do yet.
It's a tricky conversation, man, because it's a very real reaction when you're like, we have this, like, people who aren't as environmentally conscious. Like, I think of things I can do better, and then I think about things that I'm completely wasteful digitally, and there's a guilt there. And yet at the same time, there's a reality of the day to day, and it's like there's some serious cognitive dissonance.
Yeah, there is, and I have to say this a lot as well to people: is don't feel guilty for something that you didn't know about.
Right.
You can't.
I'm still gonna do
it. I can't punish you for your lack of knowledge. Nobody can. Like that. Right. That is not a thing. That is not right to do. But if you find out and you still do exactly the same, then shame on you. But if you find out and then change, perfect. I mean, if we're talking about, the energy demand of data centers is growing. That is not going to change. The only way to change that is to try and start reducing our demand on these services, whether that is social media, email marketing, search engine optimization, websites, data, everything, to try and reduce that. I mean, there was a study by Reuters, and they've literally come out and said that US data centers, their energy demand is going to double by 2030. Like double.
I mean, if it's any consolation, I'm doing my part by voting against them locally in terms of placement, but they'll still find somewhere else to put them.
This is the thing, that will literally just find somewhere else to do it. And I think it goes to like terminology as well, and kind of lack of understanding with some of the terminology. Like, as we touched on before, talking about the cloud and how saying the cloud makes it seem so completely ethereal. And then there's obviously within the tech world, serverless, which still uses the exact same data centers, just in a slightly different way.
Damn you, marketers!
It is. It is. I'm almost. It's borderline greenwashing for me.
Yeah,
It's so close to it that I think it should just be called outright.
Chris, it's such an interesting topic, and it's definitely something that I feel like deserves more of a spotlight. I'm happy that we're able to bring it on the show, and I apologize, and I also don't apologize to our viewers and listeners at home that you now have that knowledge. So that's on you whether or not you decide to change your behavior. And I will definitely personally try to make a slight difference at the very least at email marketing, if not much bigger. If there's one big recommendation that someone can do today to reduce at an individual level their imprint, what would be your recommendation?
Individually, there's so many. I think within an organization, it's unsubscribe to emails that you don't read. Delete really, really old ones if they're not useful anymore. Obviously, this is more within the workplace, but at home, don't stream in 4K. Yeah. I think that's probably the biggest one. I think, if you are, don't get me wrong, I love streaming stuff. I love the Mandalorian series. I love Netflix, but I never watch it in 4K. One, I can't really tell the difference because I wear glasses, but two, it reduces my energy demand. It reduces the amount of data that's being transmitted by a huge amount.
It's more than fair.
So yeah, it kind of massively helps.
Okay, so thank you so much for kind of like sharing all these insights. I think it's really important. Are you ready for some rapid fire rankings?
Oh, yes, please.
Let's bring this back to SEO. Here we go. We're going to put the music on. We're going to bring it back to the clock. It is all relevant regardless. Okay, first off, Chris, rank your top 3 of something you love, anything, most in the world.
Something that I love. Just randomly, I think music has to be a massive one. Family and the planet.
I love it. Easy. 1, 2, 3. Rank your best SEO or marketing win.
I completely redesigned the website and didn't actually change much of the content at all. Just made it more lightweight and more sustainable. Even migrated the domain, so it was a completely different URL, and everything boosted within its rankings.
There you go. I love that. Rank your top 3 SEO tools.
Screaming Frog, because I think it's brilliant at indexing stuff and kind of diagnosing a few bits. Webmaster Tools, just because everybody uses it and it's really super linked to Google. And Hemingway, which isn't an SEO tool, but it's an editor that I use on a daily basis.
You're talking content SEO. It's like they're one and the same.
Absolutely.
Rank your best SEO trick or tactic.
To focus on conversion rather than winning traffic.
I love that. I mean, that's what SEO should be about, is ultimately about revenue, leads, actual business metrics. Rank what you do love most about SEO, even though it's tangentially related to a lot of what you do.
What I love most about SEO is the fact that it can be used to shorten user journeys. And I think that's probably going to be one of the key things. SEO is obviously all about boosting traffic, but if all that traffic is going to a single location and having to be diverted through an entire web structure, then use SEO to shorten it. Have specific landing pages for specific keywords. It's not that difficult.
It's a brilliant perspective. I really like that. Rank your best learning SEO resource.
Probably my own experience. I mean, probably because I say that I'm not an SEO person. I obviously not about it. It's completely linked to what I do, into what I used to do as a web developer. But yeah, I think it's literally just learn by doing. If you have a mentor, great. If you have somebody that you can ask a lot from, great. If you don't, you can learn it yourself. It's just try. If you fail, at least you've learned something.
I love that. And it's so true because, like, it is very much a black box. Okay, I'm going to flip it a little, put you on the spot, but more in your wheelhouse. Rank your top 1 to 3 digital sustainability people in your industry that you admire or look up to the most.
Top three. Tim Frick. I don't know because he's one of the main people behind it. Mark Butcher, who speaks a lot about green operations and deals with a lot of very, very large organizations. Third one's difficult because I think I'd have to say Tom Greenwood. I used to work for Tom as a web developer many years ago. Learned a lot from him, and yeah, wanted to kind of take, he kind of made me want to take that information even further.
There you go. So check out in the description notes. We'll have links to their social platforms so you can find and connect with those folks. And then finally, rank your number one cause or charity that you want to promote.
Big Orange Heart. This one's quite easy. So they used to be called WPN Up. This is going back when I was a developer. They're a mental health charity that worked a lot with WordPress developers, mainly remotely, and have since opened up to work with any remote worker. So if you ever feel like that you need anybody to talk to, or that you and work within the industry, bigorangeheart.org, and talk to somebody.
That's awesome. Yeah. So find them in the links in the description as well. Chris, if people want to find you online, connect, learn more about digital sustainability, where's the best place to get in touch?
Probably as boring as it is, LinkedIn. I think it's probably one of the least toxic social media platforms out there at the minute. So that's where I am.
I was going to say, give it a minute. We'll see. No, thank you so much for joining me. This has been a really enlightening, important conversation to end out the year. I appreciate it, man.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me. It's been good to kind of spread all this knowledge.
Heck yeah. Okay, so my name is Garrett Sussman of iPullRank. We will catch you in 2024 for a bunch of more episodes. Thank you again for watching us all year. We will catch you later. Bye-bye.